welcome back to part 16 of The Wee Free Men by Terry Pratchett. We are still in the middle of chapter 8, Land of Winter, so Tiffany and the Nakmakfeegle have just made it to the Queen's land, and Tiffany has experienced something very, very odd. So let's find out what it was. Tiffany opened her eyes. She was lying on damp ground in the snowy, gloomy wood. Pixies were watching her carefully, but she saw there were others behind them staring outward into the gloom among the tree trunks. There was stuff in the trees, lumps of stuff. It was gray, and it hung there like old cloth. She turned her head and saw William standing beside her, looking at her with concern. "That was a dream, wasn't it?" she said. "Well, no," said William. "It was, ye ken, and there again it wasna." Tiffany sat up suddenly, causing the pixies to leap back. "But that thing was in it, and then you all came out of the oven," she said. "You were in my dream. What is or was that creature?" William McGonagall stared at her as if trying to make up his mind. "That was what we call a drome. Nothing here belongs here, remember. Everything is a reflection from the outside or something kidnapped from another world. And maybe something the Queen has made out of magic. It was hiding in the trees and you was going so fast you didn't see it. You ken spiders?" "Of course." "Well, spiders spin webs. Dromes spin dreams. It's easy in this place. The world you come from is nearly real. This place is nearly unreal. So it's almost a dream anyway. And the drome makes a dream for you with a trap in it for you. If you eat anything in the dream, you'll never want to leave it." He looked at Tiffany as though she should have been impressed. "What's in it for the drome?" she asked. "It likes watching dreams. It has fun watching you have fun. And it'll watch you eating dream food until you starve to death. Then the drome will eat you. Not right away, of course. It'll wait until you've gone a wee bit runny because it has no teeth." "So how can anyone get out?" "The best way is to find the drome," said Rob Anybody. "It'll be in the dream with you in disguise. Then you just gives it a good kicking." "By kicking you mean?" "Chopping its heads off." Chopping its head off generally works. Now, Tiffany thought, I am impressed. I wish I wasn't. "And this is fairyland," she said. "Aye. You could say it's a bit different. You could say it's the bit for the tourists did a see," said William. "And you did well. You were fighting it. You knew it wasn't right." Tiffany remembered the friendly cat and the falling shepherdess. She'd been trying to send herself messages. She should have listened. "Thank you for coming after me," she said meekly. "How did you do it?" "Ah, we can generally find a way into anywhere, even a dream," said William, smiling. "We're a stealing folk after all." A piece of the drome fell out of the tree and flopped onto the snow. "One of them won't get me again," said Tiffany. "Aye, I believe you. You have murder in your eyes," said William with a touch of admiration. "If I was a drome, I'd be pretty fearful now if I had a brain. There'll be more of them, mark you, and some of them are cunning. The Queen uses them as guards." "I won't be fooled." Tiffany remembered the horror of the moment when the thing had lumbered around, changing shape. It was worse because it was in her house, her place. She'd felt real terror as the big shapeless thing crashed across the kitchen, but the anger had been there too. It was invading her place. That thing wasn't just trying to kill her, it was insulting her. William was watching her. "Aye, you're looking mighty fierce," he said. "You must love your brother to face these monsters for him." And Tiffany couldn't stop her thoughts. "I don't love him. I know I don't. He's just so sticky and can't keep up, and I have to spend too much time looking after him, and he's always screaming for him. I can't talk to him. He just wants all the time." But her second thinking said, "He's mine. My place, my home, My brother. How dare anything touch what's mine? She'd been brought up not to be selfish. She knew she wasn't, not in the way people meant. She tried to think of other people. She never took the last slice of bread. This was a different feeling. She wasn't being brave or noble or kind. She was doing this because it had to be done, because there was no way that she could not do it. She thought of Granny Aching's light, weaving slowly across the downs on freezing, sparkly nights, or in storms like a raging war, saving lambs from creeping frost or rams from the precipice. She froze and struggled and would be she froze and struggled and tramped through the night for idiot sheep that never said thank you and would be just as stupid tomorrow and get into the same trouble again. And she did it because not doing it was unthinkable. There had been a time when they met the peddler and the donkey in the lane. It was a small donkey and could hardly be seen under the pack piled on it, and the peddler was thrashing it because it had fallen over. Tiffany had cried to see that, and Granny had looked at her and then said something to Thunder and Lightning. The peddler had stopped when he heard the growling. The sheepdogs had taken up position on either side of the man, so he couldn't quite see them both at once. He raised his stick as if to hit Lightning, and Thunder's growl grew louder. "I'd advise you not to do that," said Granny. He wasn't a stupid man. The eyes of the dogs were like steel balls. He lowered his arm. "Now throw down the stick," said Granny. The man did so, dropping it into the dust as though it had suddenly grown red hot. Granny walked forward and picked it up. Tiffany remembered that it was a willow twig, long and whippy. Suddenly, so fast that her hand was a blur, Granny sliced it across the man's face twice, leaving 2 long red marks. He began to move, and some desperate thought must have saved him, because now the dogs were almost frantic for the command to leap. "Hurts, don't it?" said Granny pleasantly. "Now, I knows who you are, and I reckon you knows who I am. You sell pots and pans, and they ain't bad as I recall. But if I put the word out that you have no business in my hills, be told. Better to feed your beast than whip it. You hear me?" With his eyes shut and his hands shaking, the man nodded. "That'll do," said Granny Aching, and instantly the dogs became, once more, 2 ordinary sheepdogs who came and sat on either side of her with their tongues hanging out. Tiffany watched the man unpack some of the load and strap it to his own back, then, with great care, urged the donkey along the road. Granny watched him go while filling her pipe with Jolly Sailor. Then as she lit it, she said, as if the thought had just occurred to her, them as can do has to do for them as cannot, and someone has to speak up for them as has no voices." Tiffany thought, is this what being a witch is? It wasn't what I expected. When do the good bits happen? She stood up. "Let's keep going," she said. "Aren't you tired?" said Rob. "We're going to keep going." "Aye? Well, she's probably headed for the place beyond the wood. If we didn't carry you, it'll take a couple of hours." "I'll walk." The memory of the huge dead face of the drone was trying to come back into her mind, but fury gave it no space. "Where's the frying pan?" "Thank you. Let's go." She set off through the strange trees. The hoof prints almost glowed in the gloom. Here and there other tracks crossed them, tracks that would have been made by bird feet, rough, round footprints that could have been made by anything, squiggly lines that a snake might make, if there were such a thing as snow snakes. The pixies were running in line with her on either side. Even with the edge of the fury dying away, it was hard looking at things here without her head aching. Things that seemed far off got closer too quickly. Trees changed shape as she passed them. "Almost unreal," William had said. "Nearly a dream." This world didn't have enough reality in it for distances and shapes to work properly. Once again, the magic artist was painting madly. If she looked hard at a tree, it changed and became more tree-like and less like something drawn by Wentworth with his eyes shut. This is a made-up world, Tiffany thought, almost like a story. The trees don't have to be very detailed because who looks at the trees in a story? She stopped in a small clearing and stared hard at a tree. It seemed to know it was being watched and became more real. The bark roughened and proper twigs grew on the ends of branches. The snow was melting around her feet, too. Although melting was the wrong word. It was just disappearing, leaving leaves and grass. If I was a world that didn't have enough reality to go around, Tiffany thought, then snow would be quite handy. Doesn't take a lot of effort. It's just white stuff. Everything looks white and simple, but I can make it complicated. I'm more real than this place. She heard a buzzing overhead and looked up. Suddenly the air was filling with small people, smaller than the Feagles, with wings like dragonflies. There was a golden glow around them. Tiffany, entranced, reached out a hand. At the same moment, what felt like the entire clan of the Knack McFeagle landed on her back and set her sliding into a snowdrift. When she struggled out, the clearing was a battlefield. The pixies were jumping and slashing at the flying creatures, which buzzed around them like wasps. As she stared, two of them dived onto Rob Anybody and lifted him off his feet by his hair. He rose in the air, yelling and struggling. Tiffany leaped up and grabbed him around the waist, flailing at the creatures with her other hand. They let go of the pixie and dodged easily, zipping through the air as fast as hummingbirds. One of them bit her on the finger before buzzing away. Somewhere a voice went, "Oor!" Rob struggled in Tiffany's grip. "Quick, put me down," he yelled. "There's going to be poetry." And now we're on chapter 9. Should we keep going? I think we should. Okay. Chapter 9, Lost Boys. The moan rolled around the clearing as mournful as a month of Mondays. Row! It sounded like some animal in terrible pain, but it was, in fact, not as big as medium-sized Jock, but bigger than wee Jock, who was standing on a snowdrift with one hand pressed to his heart and the other outstretched theatrically. He was rolling his eyes, too. "Ooh! Ugh, the muse is a terrible thing to have happen to you," said Rob Anybody, putting his hands over his ears. "Oh, it is with great lamentation and much worrying and dismay," the pixie groaned, "that we regard the doleful prospect of fairyland in considerable decay." In the air, flying creatures stopped attacking and began to panic. Some of them flew into one another. "With quite a large number of dreadful accidents happening every day," not as big as medium-sized Jock, but bigger than wee Jock recited, "including, I am sorry to say, an aerial attack by the otherwise attractive Fae." The flyers screeched. Some crashed into the snow, but the ones still capable of flight swarmed off among the trees. "Witness by all of us at this time and celebrate in this hasty rhyme," not as big as medium-sized Jock, but bigger than wee Jock shouted after them. And they were gone. Feagles were picking themselves up off the ground. Some were bleeding where fairies had bitten them. Several were lying curled up, groaning. Tiffany looked at her own finger. The bite of the fairy had left 2 tiny holes. "It isna too bad," Rob Anybody shouted up from below. No one taken by them, just a few cases where the lads didn't put their hands over their ears in time." "Are they all right?" "Oh, they'll be fine with counselling." On the mound of snow, William clapped not as big as medium-sized Jock, but bigger than wee Jock on the shoulder in a friendly way. "That, lad," he said proudly, "was some of the worst poetry I've ever heard. It was offensive to the ear and torture to the soul. The last couple of lines need some work, but you have the groaning off fine. All in all, very commendable effort. We'll make a gunnagle out of you yet." Not as big as medium-sized Jock, but bigger than wee Jock blushed happily. In fairyland, words really have power, Tiffany thought. And I am more real. I'll remember that. The pixies assembled into battle order again, although it was pretty disorderly, and set off. Tiffany didn't rush too far ahead this time. "That's your little people with wings," said Rob, as Tiffany sucked at her finger. "Are you happier now?" "Why were they trying to carry you away?" Ugh, they carry the victims off to their nest where their young ones. Stop, said Tiffany. This is going to be horrible, right? Oh, aye, said Rob. Gruesome. And you used to live here? But it wasna so bad back then. It wasna perfect, mark you. But the queen wasna as cold in them days. The king was still around. She was always happy then. What happened? Did the king die? No. They had words, if you take my meaning, said Rob. Oh, you mean like an argument? A bit, maybe, said Rob. But they was magical words. Forests destroyed, mountains exploding, a few hundred deaths, that kind of thing. And he went off into his own world. Fairyland was never a picnic, you ken, even in the old days. But it was fine if you kept alert. And there was flowers and birdies in summertime. Now there's dromes and the hounds and the stinging fae, and such stuff creeping in from their own worlds, and the whole place has gone down the tubes. Things taken from their own world, thought Tiffany, as she tramped through the snow. Worlds all squashed together like peas in a sack, or hidden inside one another like bubbles inside another bubble. She had a picture in her head of things creeping out of their own world and into another, in the same way that mice invaded the larder. Only there were worse things than mice. What would a drome do if it got into our world? You'd never know it was there. It'd sit in the corner and you'd never see it because it wouldn't let you. And it'd change the way you saw the world, give you nightmares, make you want to die. Her second thoughts added, I wonder how many have got in already and we don't know. And I'm in fairyland, where dreams can hurt, where stories are real, all songs are true. I thought that was strange for the Kelda to say. Tiffany's second thought said, hang on, was that a first thought? And Tiffany thought, no, that was a third thought. I'm thinking about how I think about what I'm thinking. At least, I think so. Her second thought said, let's calm down, please, because this is quite a small head. The forest went on, or perhaps it was a small forest and somehow moved around them as they walked. This was fairyland, after all. You couldn't trust it. And the snow still vanished where Tiffany walked, and she only had to look at a tree for it to smarten up and make an effort to look like a real tree. The queen is, well, a queen, Tiffany thought. She's got a world of her own. She could do anything with it, and all she does is steal things and mess up people's lives. There was the thud of hoofbeats in the distance. It's her. What shall I do? What shall I say? The Knack McFeagle leaped behind the trees. Come away out of the path, whispered Rob Anybody. She might still have him, said Tiffany, gripping the panhandle nervously and staring at the blue shadows between the trees. So? We'll find a way to steal him. She's the queen. You cannot beat the queen face to face. The hoofbeats were louder, and now it sounded as though there was more than one animal. A stag approached through the trees, steam pouring off of it. It stared at Tiffany with wild red eyes, then, bunching up, leaped over her. She smelled the stink of it as she ducked. She felt its sweat on her neck. That was a real animal. You couldn't imagine a reek like that. And here came the dogs. The first one she caught with the edge of the pan, bowling it over. The other turned to snap at her and then looked down in amazement as pixies erupted from the snow under each paw. It was hard to bite anyone when all four of your feet were moving away in different directions. And then other pixies landed on its head, anything ever again became impossible. The Knack McFeagle hated grimhounds. Tiffany looked up at a white horse. That was real too, as far as she could tell. And there was a boy on it. Who are you? He said. He made it sound like, what sort of thing are you? Who are you? Said Tiffany, pushing her hair out of her eyes. It was the best she could do right now. This is my forest, said the boy. I command you to do what I say. Tiffany peered at him. The dull second-hand light of fairyland was not very good, but the more she looked, the more certain she was. Your name is Roland, isn't it? She said. You will not speak to me like that. Yes, it is. You're the Baron's son. I demand that you stop talking. The boy's expression was strange now. creased up and pink as if he was trying not to cry. He raised his hand with a riding whip in it. There was a very faint thwap. Tiffany glanced down. The Nakmekfeagle had formed a pile under the horse's belly, and one of them, climbing up on their shoulders, had just cut through the saddle girth. She held up a hand quickly. "Stand still," she shouted, trying to sound commanding. "If you move, you'll fall off your horse." "Is that a spell? Are you a witch?" The boy dropped the whip and pulled a long dagger from his belt. "Death to witches!" He urged the horse forward with a jerk, and then there was one of those long moments, a moment when the whole universe said, "Uh-oh." And still holding the dagger, the boy swiveled around on the horse and landed in the snow. Tiffany knew what would happen next. Rob Anybody's voice echoed among the trees. "You're in trouble now, pal. Get him!" "No!" yelled Tiffany. "Get away from him!" The boy scrambled backward, staring at Tiffany in horror. "I do know you," she said. "Your name is Roland. You're the Baron's son. They said that you died in the forest." "You mustn't talk like that." "Why not?" "Bad things happen." "They're already happening," said Tiffany. "Look, I'm here to rescue my—" But the boy had got to his feet and was running back through the forest. He turned and shouted, "Stay away from me!" Tiffany ran after him, jumping over snow-covered logs, and saw him ahead, dodging from tree to tree. Then he paused and looked back. She ran up to him, saying, "I know how to get you out," and danced. She was holding the hand of a parrot, or at least someone with the head of a parrot. Her feet moved under her perfectly. They twirled her around, and this time her hand was caught by a peacock, or someone with the head of a peacock. She glanced over his shoulder and saw that she was now in a room. No, a ballroom, full of masked people dancing. "Ah," she thought, "another dream. I should have looked where I was going." The music was strange. There was a kind of rhythm to it, but it sounded muffled and odd, as if it was being played backwards underwater by musicians who'd never seen their instruments before. And she hoped the dancers were wearing masks. She realized she was looking out through the eye holes of one and wondered what she was. She was also wearing a long dress, which glittered. "Okay," she thought carefully. "There was a drome there, and I didn't stop to look, and now I'm in a dream. But it's not mine. It must make use of what it finds in your head, and I've never been to anything like this." "Wha wha 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 wha," said the peacock in a voice that was like the music. It almost sounded like a voice, but didn't. "Oh, yes," said Tiffany. "Fine." "Wha? Oh, woof woof woof?" This seemed to work. The peacock-headed dancer bobbed a little bow and said, "Wah wah wah," sadly, and wandered off. And there I will stop. There's some weird stuff going on in Fairyland, and we're going to find out more about it next time. I hope you have a great day. See you soon.